She went back to her hometown and began stopping passing cars in the evenings. A heavy, bloody axe awaited the lone drivers who wanted her.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'll tell you a story about a vengeful girl named Wilma. Everyone around here knows what she did to those who wronged her. Erno was driving along the highway. The speedometer needle was pushing, passing by an endless line of autumn woods. It was already getting dark. Rain poured into the windshield of the old Ford. It was the only thing I could get in the parking lot near Raven Prison. Raven Prison. It's been his home for 20 years. He was now 40, slightly gray, with a swarthy face and piercing brown eyes. One would say he was well preserved. Now Erno was in emotional excitement. He turned on the radio at full speed and with pleasure pressed the gas pedal. At last he was free. He had been caught in one of the brothels. At that time he had already committed 2 murders. The victims were young girls who weren't lucky enough to get into his car. All this was done with extreme cruelty, and Erno dismembered the bodies of the victims and buried them in the forest of Brandevere. No matter how hard he tried to cover his tracks, he was found out and locked up for 20 long years. The dashboard light flashed, telling me it was time to fill up the car. The ex-con had no money, but he knew what he was doing. After pulling up to the gas station and filling up a full tank, Erno went to pay. There was a guy behind the cash register chewing gum. "That'll be 40 kroner, the kid said, chomping. Erno took his time walking up to the counter. The salesman looked at him and leaned slightly over the register. That was enough. One precise blow from below and a sharpened piece of rebar entered under his lower jaw, penetrating his entire skull and entering his brain. The slurping stopped. The owner of the Ford walked leisurely to his car. The door slammed, and the car drove on, splitting the rain falling from the dark skies. The rain intensified. He slowed down. "I don't want to have an accident because of the weather," Erno thought. He drove and thought that now he did not care what would happen next. After 20 years spent in Raven, there was no going back. In the headlights he notices the silhouette of a man trying to catch a passing car. Erno stops and rolls down his window. "How far away are you?" he asks. "No, about 5 kilometers, replies a pleasant female voice. "My God, it cannot be. There are no such coincidences," thought to himself Erno. His insides were tense. His head was full of memories of those 2 girls. "It's a gift from fate, that's for sure," the thought flashed in his head. "I'll give you a lift, sit down," and helped her open the door. She got into the car, pulled the hood off her head, and Erno saw a dark-haired, green-eyed beauty. "My name is Wilma," the companion said, looking intently at the murderer. Her gaze became questioning. Oh. "Excuse me, I'm Erno. I've been admiring you. You're very beautiful." "I'm sorry," Erno replied, a little embarrassed. "I know," she said with a playful smile. Erno pressed the gas pedal and the car drove off, rustling the tires and throwing out the small rocks lying on the side of the road. Wilma fidgeted a little and sat up comfortably, so that the flaps of her wet coat fell down, exposing her graceful legs. The former convict cast a quick glance and a predatory smirk played on his face. After 7 minutes of silence, Wilma said, "Here, turn right, in 2 kilometers my house will be." They drove along a narrow, bumpy road, if you could even call it a road. A rutted road in the middle of the forest. "How long have you been on the road?" Wilma asked. 2 hours, maybe, Erno answered, rubbing his eyes. "May I buy you a cup of tea, as a thank you for your service?" said Wilma, with a beguiling look in her green eyes. "I'd be very happy to," Erno replied with a slight smile. They drove up to the house. It was still raining. In the distance, a full moon was shining between the clouds. The house where Vilma lived was situated on a hill. It was built in the English style of red bricks and looked like a small castle. Behind it you could see more houses in the distance, and some of them had lights on. "What is the name of your village, because I did not see a sign on the road?" Erno asked, slamming the car door. "This is Harvin's village. There are hardly any inhabitants left here," Vilma said. They went inside the house. "Do you live alone?" Erno asked, though he had guessed already that nobody would bother him today. He was already anticipating what he would do to her, and tonight would be a gift to him, for those long years of waiting. These thoughts made his heart race and his pants get an erection. "Yes, alone. My parents died when I was a teenager," Wilma said. "Go to the hall, I'll make us some tea now," she said. Erno went into the room. It was quite large. Close to the window there was a bookcase. In the center of the room there were 3 armchairs and a table. There was a thick carpet on the floor, and it was somehow misaligned, relative to the whole interior of the room. It looked as if someone had deliberately moved it away from the window, exposing the old creaky wooden floor. Erno went over to the closet and decided to look at the collection of books. He wondered, for a home library could tell a lot about its owner. Psychoanalysis, psychology, criminal psychopathology, anatomy. A strange selection for a young girl. He didn't hear her enter the room. He turned around as Wilma was arranging the cups on the table. "Erno, look how beautiful the moon is tonight," she said. Erno turned to the big window and looked up. There was a huge moon shining in the sky. "Yes, it's beautiful today," Erno said a little dreamily. He lowered his head and saw what this beautiful moon was illuminating with its cold light. There were about a dozen grave crosses sticking out of the ground near the house. "What the?" was the last thing the maniac saw and uttered. The heavy double-sided axe cracked into his skull, cutting through it all the way to the neck. Erno's body fell to the wooden floor along with the murder weapon stuck in his head. It wasn't without difficulty that Wilma pulled the axe from the bastard's head. She had to press the head with her foot to the floor to get it out. Her shoes were now stained with blood. The carpet should stay clean, so Wilma carefully removed her shoes. She leaned the axe against the wall and sat down in a chair. She drank her tea, gazing aloof at the moon. She was 12 years old. One beautiful summer sunny day, Wilma went to a clearing by the highway to pick flowers and pick strawberries. They were passing by, but stopped to go to the bathroom. There were 3 of them, and they took turns doing it to her. After all that had happened, Wilma's psyche could not handle such trauma on its own, and she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. She stayed there for 6 years. During that time, her parents died and she was left alone. She was released, went back to her village, back to her home, and in the evenings she began stopping cars that were passing by. Lone drivers who lusted after her had a heavy double-edged axe waiting for them.
If you liked the story, please subscribe and like. Till tomorrow.